Hey guys, tonight we're headed somewhere hot. Really hot. Not just, oof, it's a scorcher hot, but full-on desert oven, sun bakes your shoes hot. You're standing in the middle of an ancient Persian town. The buildings are sun-bleached, the air shimmers, and the stone streets radiate heat like they're trying to cook you. There's not a single leaf in sight, and yet, as you step closer to a tall, mysterious tower jutting from one rooftop, something shifts. A breeze. Soft, cool, deliberate. Like someone just opened a refrigerator and aimed it at your face. This, my friend, is a Badgir, a Persian Windcatcher. And it's about to make the desert feel like springtime. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And tell me in the comments, where in the world are you watching from? And what time is it there? Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You shuffle your way through the sun-blasted street, ducking beneath faded awnings and brushing past baskets of dried figs. A donkey eyes you like he owns the place, swishing his tail slowly as though even that takes effort in this heat. You're in Yazd, an ancient Iranian city that's endured centuries of sun without giving in. And above nearly every roofline, the skyline bristles with odd vertical chimneys. Towers split down the middle, or with crisscrossing vents that look like upturned birdhouses. They aren't chimneys, and they aren't decorative. These are Windcatchers, designed to trap, guide, and channel even the shyest desert breeze down into the heart of the home. Historians still argue whether Windcatchers were invented in Yazd itself, or borrowed and perfected from nearby cultures. Some say the earliest ones appeared in Egypt around 1300 BCE. Others insist the Persians turned them into true art. What's not up for debate is this. By the time of the Achaemenid Empire, the Badgir had become essential architecture, just as important as the courtyard or the kitchen. You approach one of these towers, craning your neck to see. It's taller than it seems from afar, maybe 10 meters or more. Slits run down its sides, each angled to face a cardinal direction. You're not an engineer, but you know clever when you see it. One slit faces the breeze, funneling it downward. Another slit on the opposite side releases warmer air rising from below. It's a constant cycle of inhale and exhale, as though the house itself is breathing. You step inside the home it belongs to, a modest mud brick abode with cool stone floors and filtered sunlight dappling the walls. The air is astonishingly comfortable. You half expect someone to offer you mint tea, but the house is quiet. Its people off at the mosque or market. The breeze from the Badgir has traveled down into a shaft that opens into the living space. Some versions would send the wind across a shallow pool or ceramic jars filled with cool water, adding moisture to the dry air and cooling it even further. You sit cross-legged near the pool and close your eyes. It feels unreasonably pleasant. There's no humming fan, no electrical box, no fossil fuels involved. Just air, water, geometry, and a few thousand years of trial and error genius. You remember reading somewhere that Persian engineers were obsessed with balance, between heat and cool, light and shadow, motion and stillness. Windcatchers are the physical embodiment of that idea. They don't fight the desert, they dance with it. Invite it in, tame it. Let it work for you. And of course, they were customizable. Wealthy homes might have 4 or even 8 directional Windcatchers, ensuring that no matter which way the wind blew, someone got a breeze. Humble homes might share a Windcatcher between neighbors, an early kind of desert HVAC timeshare. Some had flaps inside to direct airflow. Others worked purely on shape and pressure. There's even evidence some Badgers had reverse settings, using the rising hot air of the day to suck cooler nighttime air down into underground storage rooms or sleeping areas. If it sounds like magic, well, that's because it sort of is. Ancient physics magic, powered by wind, math, and mud. You wander deeper into the home. The walls are thick, up to 3 feet in some places. The floors are covered with woven mats, and the windows are small and high, designed to admit light without heat. Every inch of this building is trying to keep you cool, and the Windcatcher? It hums. Not like a machine. More like a seashell or a whisper. You can almost hear the air curling down the shaft, spiraling across the walls, brushing the floor like a cat's tail. It's relaxing. soothing. You stretch out near the fountain and imagine what it would have been like to live here. Centuries ago, in the time of Darius or Xerxes. You'd wake at dawn before the heat, tend to the animals, barter in the market, nap during the day, pray as the sun dipped low, and sleep beneath the soundless wind of your Badgir. Of course, if you were part of the laboring class, you probably wouldn't get first dibs on the coolest room. You might be sleeping closer to the kitchen where the warmth lingered longer, or outside in a courtyard hammock if you were lucky. But still, the wind was for everyone. It couldn't be hoarded. Couldn't be. Historians still argue whether the design of these towers was purely scientific or carried symbolic meaning. Was each direction of airflow tied to religious cosmology? Did the four winds represent something more? Or did Persian architects just have a knack for catching a breeze? You glance up at the shaft again. There's a bird nesting in a crevice just below the top vent. Smart bird. You could do worse than raising a family next to constant fresh air. The tower catches a change in wind and redirects it subtly across the room. You didn't even notice the shift at first, just the absence of staleness. No perfume, no sweat, no sunburnt dust. Just air. Alive, ancient, and astonishing. And in that moment, the desert feels not like a punishment, but a promise. You're still lying on the cool floor of that mud brick home, listening to the Windcatcher above you. It creaks just slightly as the breeze adjusts. A faint hiss, like sand slipping between stones, whispers down its narrow throat. And suddenly you're curious. How exactly does this tower work its gentle magic? You stand and make your way back outside, squinting up at the tall, narrow structure again. Up close, it looks almost fragile, like something that would collapse in a strong storm. But here's the trick. It doesn't need to fight the wind. It invites it. This isn't a tower for defense or glory. It's a tower for listening. The Badgir, or Windcatcher, is hollow inside, sometimes divided by partitions or internal veins that help guide air downward into the house. The outside walls are often smooth mud plaster, but inside things get clever. Angles, tunnels, channels that twist slightly like an architectural ear canal. You climb a nearby rooftop and step close to another Windcatcher. It's taller than the one you were just in. Your guide, an elderly man with a sun-creased face and sandals made of palm fiber, leans on his walking stick beside you. They all sound different, he says, voice nearly lost to the wind. Like people. You listen. And sure enough, this Windcatcher hums deeper, a soft moan as though it's remembering something old. Down below in the room it serves, you can hear clay jars rattle just slightly on their shelves. Not from movement, just from air, passing, cooling, living. Historians still debate whether each Badgir's pitch was designed intentionally, or if the sound was simply a byproduct. Some believe architects of the time could tune a tower, adjusting its width and orientation to create a specific frequency. Others say the sound wasn't important, only the airflow mattered. But here you are, standing between two towers, and one sounds like a flute, the other like a sigh. It's hard to believe that's accidental. You ask your guide how the towers were used at night. The air is cooler, he says, but still moves. When we were boys, we used to sleep right under the shaft, covered in wool but with our faces bare. The wind would kiss us all night. You can't help but smile at that image. A kiss from the wind, better than any lullaby. He explains that Badgirs could serve two purposes: air intake or air exhaust. If the wind blew toward the vent, it was caught and forced downward. But if the wind blew away from the vent, it created suction inside the tower, drawing up the warm, stale air from the house and pushing it out. This dual function made the Badgir adaptable to the fickle moods of desert air. Some wealthier homes had internal channels that could be opened or closed with wooden panels or pottery valves. You picture a family sitting down to dinner and someone saying, "Could you shut the west vent? It's making my lentils cold." And it wasn't just the homes. Public bathhouses, mosques, storage rooms, all of them used Windcatchers in some form. Even underground cisterns, massive domes where water was stored, had miniature versions to keep things cool and clean. You lean against the low parapet, looking out at the skyline of Yazd. Dozens, maybe hundreds of towers rise above the roofs. Some square, others octagonal. A few are battered, their stucco peeling like sunburn. But most are intact, their narrow mouths yawning open to the sky. A young boy passes by on the rooftop across the alley. He's flying a kite made from newspaper and twine. It lifts easily, tugged by the same wind the towers love so well. You glance down and notice something strange. At the base of one Badgir, a small opening leads to a stone tunnel. Your guide notices. That, he says, is for water. You'll see soon. But before we go underground, you linger on the tower a bit longer. Its interior is surprisingly complex. Some Windcatchers had wooden slats inside like a maze to slow the air down and reduce turbulence. Others had multiple vertical shafts within a single tower, each capturing a different breeze. A few even had cloth screens stretched across the vents, soaked with water during the hottest hours to boost evaporative cooling. Basically, these towers could pull off air conditioning centuries before Freon and thermostats were a thing. And they did it with no moving parts, no buzzing fans, just the earth, the air, and a little human cleverness. Historians argue about whether the idea of Windcatchers spread outward from Persia, or whether it was a case of parallel invention, like how pyramids appeared in both Egypt and Mesoamerica. Some point to similar towers in ancient Pakistan, in Egypt's Luxor region, even in the hot corners of Spain after the Moorish occupation. But nowhere do they seem quite as central, quite as loved as in Iran. You look at the base of the tower again and realize, this isn't just a structure, it's a philosophy. A worldview baked into architecture. One that doesn't resist nature but reads it, folds it inward, lets it live inside the walls. The guide taps your arm gently. Come, he says. Now we go where the air begins. You descend the rooftop stairs and prepare to follow the breeze to its source. You follow the old man down a shaded corridor, your sandals slapping softly against stone, worn smooth by centuries of footfalls. The air is still cool here, but it changes as you go. Less of a breeze now, more of a breath, like you're walking inside the lungs of the city. The path leads you to an open courtyard, quiet and sun-drenched. A sleeping cat stretches beneath a fig tree, completely unbothered by the heat. Across the square, a small archway yawns open, barely taller than your shoulders. The man gestures. This way, mind your head. You duck and enter. Inside, the light disappears almost instantly, replaced by the muffled hush of underground space. The air grows denser, cooler. It's the kind of cool that wraps around your neck and ankles, soft and still. You hear dripping water somewhere ahead, and then, beneath your feet, mud brick? The floor gives just slightly as you walk, springy from age and moisture. You're inside a construction tunnel, not a palace, not a temple, just an artery beneath the city. And yet it feels sacred somehow. He lights a small oil lamp and begins to talk. This is where it all starts. Before the wind, before the tower, you must have water. No water, no wind. You blink at him a bit confused. The air comes from water? He smiles, the way only someone who's told the story 100 times does. No, but the cool does. He walks ahead, leading you deeper underground. Soon you arrive at a narrow shaft, only waist-high, sloping downward into shadow. This, he explains, is a Qanat, a marvel of Persian engineering that makes the Windcatcher possible. Qanats are ancient underground canals, sloping tunnels hand-dug for miles from distant mountain springs to cities and villages below. They let gravity do all the work. Water flows down the slope, untouched by the heat of the sun, moving silently through the bones of the earth. Historians believe Qanats date back to at least 1000 BCE, maybe earlier. Some stretch for over 40 miles. And they're not just for drinking or farming. Some were built specifically to run beneath homes with windcatchers above, letting the air flow across the cold stone channel before entering the living space. You kneel by the opening and feel the draft. It's subtle but real. The warm air from above slips down, touches the cool Qanat surface, then rises gently up the house's wind shaft. What comes out isn't just wind, it's cooled wind. Ancient air conditioning, delivered by gravity, mud, and patience. Historians still argue how early Persians coordinated Qanat digging with urban planning. Some say the two evolved together. Others think Windcatchers came long after the first irrigation channels. What's clear is that once someone connected the dots, desert living changed forever. Your guide motions again. We follow the tunnel a little. He leads you along a side path, carved just wide enough for two people to pass. Every 20 meters or so, a small vertical shaft rises overhead. These were the access wells dug during construction. Sunlight filters down through one, just enough to make the clay walls glow a pale gold. As you walk, you notice niches in the walls, once used for lamps or maybe even resting spots. At one curve, a chunk of wall still bears faint fingerprints, centuries old, left behind by someone who dug this by hand, one basket of earth at a time. And it wasn't just men. In some villages, entire families worked on Qanats. It was dangerous labor, risk of collapse, poor air, exhaustion, but also deeply respected. Master Qanat engineers were treated like sages. They were trusted to read the slope of the land, to understand soil the way a shepherd reads the sky. You stop at a chamber where a small pool has gathered. The water is shockingly clear. A single fish, silver, small, flits through the shallows. "Still alive," the old man says, pleased. "We let one go in every spring. If we see it again downstream, we know it's clean." You sit down by the edge, toes brushing the stone. It's quiet, save for the slow gurgle of the flow. And above you, nothing, just mud brick and earth. And yet, you're not sweating. The breeze from the tower is still doing its job. Even here, the connection between Qanat and Windcatcher is suddenly obvious. One chills, the other delivers. Together, they make a home feel like it was built on a mountainside, not in a furnace. You imagine a family centuries ago, eating dinner in a courtyard above you. A pitcher of water drawn from the pool, a loaf of bread cooled by air that passed through this tunnel. Laughter, shade, maybe a drowsy dog lying beneath the windshaft, its ears twitching in the current. You lean back against the wall, a spider scurries past, minding its business. Somewhere in the darkness behind you, the Qanat flows on, slow and silent, heading for the next home, the next garden, the next breath of cool. Your guide chuckles quietly. "Better than any fan, eh?" You nod. He's right. And tomorrow, he says, they'll patch a small crack in the tunnel wall. The same crack they patched last year, and the year before that. "As long as we keep the water moving," he says, "the houses keep breathing." The two of you rise slowly, legs a little stiff, and make your way back toward the surface. As you climb the dusty steps back into daylight, the heat greets you again, but not unkindly. You know now that beneath every footstep a secret river flows, and above every rooftop a tower listens. Back above ground, you blink in the bright light. The transition from cool, shadowy earth to golden Persian sunlight feels like stepping through time itself. Your guide shades his eyes with a wrinkled hand and points to a nearby courtyard home. "Now that you know where the wind comes from," he says, "let's see where it goes." You follow him through a low doorway into a space that instantly feels intentional. That's the best word for it. The walls are thick, the arches are wide, and right in the center there's a square pool, shallow, lined with turquoise tiles gently rippling under the breeze. This is a traditional Persian hayat, or courtyard. And it's not just a pretty open-air space, it's an integral part of the home's cooling system. Think of it as the Windcatcher's dance floor. You pause in the shade of a fig tree. The air brushing your skin now isn't just moving, it's transformed. It's passed through the Badgir, over the Qanat tunnel, across the pool, and now it curls around the courtyard like it's saying hello. This isn't architecture, this is choreography. You sit on the cool stone bench and stretch your legs. Even your breath feels slower here. And above you, the Windcatcher hums gently like a flute warming up for a lullaby. Here's where the physics gets weirdly comforting. As the warm outside air enters the Windcatcher, it gets drawn downward due to pressure differentials. When it passes over the cool water in the courtyard, especially if there are clay jars of water nearby, which there often are, the air cools further through evaporation. This cooled air is then dispersed through the home by strategically placed doorways and vents. Historians still debate how much of this system was based on formal knowledge versus practical observation. Did early architects understand Bernoulli's principle? Did they read ancient scrolls of air dynamics? Or did they just keep tweaking until the breeze felt right? You lean your head back and close your eyes. A pigeon flutters onto the edge of the pool. Somewhere behind a lattice window, someone plucks a string instrument. A soft, wandering melody. A woman's voice hums along. The whole house seems to be exhaling. It's not just the Windcatcher doing the work here. The design of the rooms themselves matters. Traditional Persian homes are organized to guide airflow naturally. Taller rooms near the center pull warm air upward. Narrow hallways channel breezes. Thick walls absorb daytime heat and release it slowly overnight. Even the window placement is strategic, many high and arched to allow in light, but not direct sun. It's passive cooling, yes, but also poetic cooling. You don't just feel comfortable here, you feel like the air is taking care of you. Your guide brings over 2 clay mugs and offers you a taste of Qanat, a local summer drink made with seeds soaked in rose water. It's slightly sweet, chilled, and slips down like a sigh. Helps you sleep, he says, even without the wind. You ask if all homes had these setups or if only the wealthy could afford them. He shrugs. The poor had simpler versions. A single tower, maybe just vents near the roof. But even a little breeze is better than none. And everyone shared the knowledge. Wind was free. You picture that. A neighborhood where people helped each other build windcatchers, dig tunnels, lay tile for cooling pools. Not for fashion, not for status. Just to survive. And maybe, if they got it right, to enjoy the heat instead of fighting it. Historians still argue whether this model of passive design could be revived in today's cities. Modern buildings are efficient, sure, but are they gentle? Do they hum like these houses? Do they breathe? A cat slinks into the courtyard and flops dramatically beside the pool. You feel the same. The breeze slides across your skin, takes a quick detour through your hair, and disappears into the next archway. It doesn't ask permission, it just is. And all around you, the walls are silent. Not in a dead way, in a listening way. You imagine a sleeping child in the next room, a grandmother stitching in a corner, a merchant counting coins with the breeze at his back. These homes were designed not just to keep people cool, but to calm them. You reach down and touch the edge of the pool. The tiles are cold. The water smells faintly of lime mortar. Somewhere beneath your feet, the Qanat continues its journey. And above you, the Badgir waits for its next partner. A breath of wind, a shift in pressure, a ripple in the air. And just like that, you start to understand. This whole place isn't just resisting the desert, it's singing with it. Every part, the tower, the tunnel, the pool, the shade, joins in harmony. They don't block the heat, they dance with it, guide it, invite it to slow down, much like you're doing now. You're still in that courtyard, lazily tracing circles on the pool's surface with one finger, when your guide chuckles softly. Now you've seen the bones, he says, but not the soul. You raise an eyebrow, intrigued. The soul? He nods and points upward toward the shaft of the Windcatcher, where faint sunlight spills in like honey. What makes it all work, what turns bricks and water into comfort, is not just structure, it's movement, timing, balance, the science of sleepy breezes. You follow him through a side door into a narrower, darker corridor. This space is quieter, more private. A family's inner quarters where guests wouldn't usually be allowed. But tonight, you're an honored visitor of the wind itself. Here, the cooling system gets sneakier. The air that flowed through the Badgir, over the Qanat, and across the courtyard is now guided into a series of channels that spread throughout the house. These aren't ducts in the modern sense. They're architectural choices. Doorways positioned just so, floors slightly uneven to encourage movement, ceilings of different heights to create miniature pressure zones. You enter a domed room and immediately feel it. That same faint breeze, but now it's subtler, more diffuse. Like mist instead of rain. You sit on a carpeted bench and let your mind wander. The air brushes your neck, then your cheek. There's a rhythm to it, a pattern you can't quite name. It's like the house is breathing around you. Inhale. Pause. Exhale. Historians still debate whether ancient Persian builders understood these aerodynamic principles consciously, or whether they developed them through centuries of patient trial and error. Some scholars point to architectural treatises written in medieval Iran, full of precise measurements and airflow diagrams. Others think it was simply generational wisdom, passed from father to son, learned with the body more than the mind. Either way, the result is astonishing. There's a phenomenon here known locally as Badgir sleep, a kind of deep, trance-like nap induced by the gentle breeze that flows over the sleeping mat at just the right angle, at just the right speed. No fans, no white noise, just stillness and breath and a bit of shade. You lie back on the cushions and test it for yourself. And yes, there it is. Your eyelids grow heavier. Your muscles slacken. The breeze cools your thoughts like water on warm stones. You're not alone. The ancient Persians valued rest in ways modern life often forgets. Afternoon naps were a ritual. Entire homes were designed to support them. Summer bedrooms were located near the wind shaft or even on rooftops, where the open air could flow freely across sleeping bodies. Some wealthier homes had underground chambers called sardabs, literally cold rooms which were partially submerged and always located next to the Qanat line. You'd descend a few steps, lie down on a mat, and let the Windcatcher pull cool, dense air across your skin. The stone walls were cold to the touch. The light filtered through tiny lattice windows. You could sleep for hours and wake up chilled, even at high noon. Historians still argue about how widespread these sardabs were. Were they common in village homes or only for the elite? Were they used daily or just during peak summer months? Either way, their purpose is clear: to turn survival into serenity. You close your eyes for a moment. The cool air swirls quietly past your temples, just enough to make your hair lift. Somewhere nearby, the faint tinkle of a wind chime, a real one made of glazed ceramic discs, adds a sleepy rhythm to the moment. The guide breaks the silence with a soft joke. No one snores louder than an old man in a sardab. You chuckle. He isn't wrong. And apparently, in some households, sardabs were used as impromptu guest rooms or even romantic hideaways. Private, cool, and candlelit. You wander into another room. This one's smaller, clearly a sleeping chamber. A niche in the wall holds folded blankets, and there's a small clay bowl of dried lavender beside the bed mat. Above you, the Windcatcher vent is partially covered with a slatted screen, directing the breeze downward in a narrow stream. It hits your shoulder, just your shoulder. You shift slightly and feel it run down your arm like someone pouring silk. You imagine a hot summer night centuries ago. No electricity, no fans. Just you, your breath, and the wind. You'd lie awake staring at the stars through a lattice window, listening to the breeze roll through the Badgir. Maybe someone in the next room is whispering a prayer. Maybe a dog barks faintly down the alley. Maybe you fall asleep mid-thought because the house itself is humming a lullaby. And that's when you realize this isn't just cooling, this is healing. Psychological, spiritual even. You don't just feel less hot. You feel okay, cared for, rested. Like someone thought about your comfort hundreds of years before you were even born. You sit up and walk slowly back into the corridor, your fingers trailing along the cool plaster wall. Above you, the tower still hums. Not loudly, just enough to say, I'm still here. And in this house, this dance of brick and water and air, time doesn't matter. Only stillness does. You're beginning to feel like this house is alive. Not in a haunted, bump-in-the-night kind of way, but in the way a camel is alive. Steady, self-regulating, and supremely adapted to desert life. You're in another chamber now, one used for resting during the day. The room is deeper than others, carved partially into the earth. No windows? Just a tall ceiling with a flared opening near the top. Another wind shaft, but different this time. More discreet. You lay down on a woven mat and instantly the floor cools your spine. The air here doesn't swirl or rush, it drifts. The house breathes. This place has no thermostat, no vents, no fans or humming compressors. And yet, it breathes. Warm air rises up through vented domes and cooler air replaces it, funneled through shaded courtyards and cooled subterranean tunnels. The structure inhales during the day and exhales at night, like a creature that's found its rhythm in the sand. Some scholars call this bioclimatic architecture, but honestly that feels too cold, too clinical. You prefer to think of it as desert empathy, an understanding that your home should adjust to your body, not the other way around. And the materials? Nothing fancy. Mud brick, plaster, lime, straw. All cheap. All natural. All brilliant. These walls don't just stand, they regulate. They store heat during the day and release it at night. They absorb cool in the morning and radiate it by midday. It's like living inside a giant clay lung. Historians still debate whether windcatchers originated as part of spiritual design or purely practical survival. Some ancient Persian texts link the directions of wind to divine forces. East wind as rejuvenating, south as cleansing, west as sleep-bringing. Others say it's all clever geometry and desert trial and error. Either way, the result is the same. Coolness where there should be heat. Stillness where there should be chaos. You step into the hall and notice something subtle. A slope. Just barely noticeable. The floor isn't perfectly flat. That's intentional. It's slanted to encourage air movement, to guide cool drafts downward. Even the walls curve slightly inward near the base, creating a slight pressure differential that moves air without sound or force. You pause at a doorway framed in stucco and sunlight. On the wall is a faint geometric carving, 8 pointed stars interlaced with vines. Art, yes, but also airflow. These cutouts allow for ventilation without sacrificing privacy. Light filters through them in speckled golden beams, a kind of architectural lace. You pass through a series of rooms, each cooler than the last. In one, a group of clay amphorae sit clustered together. They once held water, or dates, or milk. But in the hottest months, they were often soaked and left in corners, not for drinking, but for cooling. As air passed over the damp surfaces, it chilled. And as it chilled, it settled. A humble, evaporative miracle. You crouch beside them and feel the air at your ankles. It's definitely cooler down here. The kind of detail you'd never notice unless you lived with it. Or unless, like now, you needed it. There's something elegant about this whole system. No wasted space, no unnecessary ornamentation. Every curve, every shadow, every shaft serves a purpose. And none of it draws attention to itself. The Windcatcher doesn't scream, "Look at me." It just works. Quietly, reliably. You enter another room, this one clearly a place of gathering. Cushions are stacked along the walls. A low table sits in the center, its legs cooled by the stone floor. And on the ceiling, another shaft, its opening shaped like a lotus. You lie on your back and look up. The breeze finds your face again, gently tugging at a loose strand of hair. It's hypnotic. In the stillness, you imagine the house talking to itself. Not in words, in whispers. "It's warm in here," says the courtyard. "I've cooled the air," replies the Qanat. "I'll deliver it," hums the Badgir. "Let it rest here," sighs the Sardab. "And all you have to do is be still." You recall stories of travelers passing through Yad in centuries past. Arabs, Turks, Indians, even Europeans. Stepping out of the desert and into these when-cooled homes, shocked by the sudden gentleness of it all. Marco Polo himself reportedly admired the cleverness of Persian architecture, though he probably used fewer adjectives. Some accounts mention how even the scent of these homes changed with the wind. Rosewater in the morning, clay and cumin in the afternoon, cool damp earth by nightfall. The breeze carried it all, wrapping daily life in soft sensory ribbons. You hear a knock on wood. Your guide again, entering with a fresh bowl of chilled melon slices. He hands it to you without speaking. No need. The melon is cold, almost too cold, and sweet enough to make you sigh involuntarily. He sits nearby and fans himself lazily with a palm frond. "The house does most of the work," he says, "but I do my part." You both laugh, and then sit in silence. And as the afternoon sun creeps toward the horizon, the breeze shifts again. Slightly cooler, a little faster. The Windcatcher responds, redirecting. The home adjusts, and you realize you're not just witnessing a technology, you're participating in a relationship. You and the air, the house and the desert, the past and the present. Everything here breathes. The day is growing older now. Shadows stretch across the courtyard tiles like soft fabric being pulled slowly toward the door. You return to the heart of the home, guided more by instinct than memory. Somehow, the rooms seem to shift as the light changes, subtly transforming their mood with the descending sun. You wander back to the Sardab, the underground summer room, and it's even cooler now. The air has thickened with comfort, just a hint of moisture in the breeze, as if the walls themselves have exhaled. There's no fanfare, no chimes to alert you. The house is simply doing what it's always done, and it never asks for credit. You trace your fingers along the inner wall. The plaster feels smooth and faintly damp, an effect of the Qanat below. The groundwater flowing beneath this home like a secret, ancient stream works in concert with the Windcatchers to cool from below while the air cools from above. It's not air conditioning, it's air choreography. You sit again and let your mind drift to the Qanats themselves. You imagine the builders, sunburned, determined, possibly barefoot, digging horizontally through unforgiving rock and earth. These channels could stretch for kilometers, sloping at barely a degree, a gentle incline maintained with uncanny precision. Historians still argue whether these underground aqueducts were a native Persian innovation or borrowed from even earlier Mesopotamian systems. Either way, Persia mastered them. Entire cities blossomed from the presence of a single Qanat. It was the invisible umbilical cord between survival and the sun. Some Qanats were so elaborate they had rest chambers, payabs, where weary workers could cool down mid-maintenance. Others were lined with clay to prevent contamination. And many, surprisingly, are still in use today. You glance at the floor again, wondering what secret waters lie beneath. Are you sitting directly above one? You wouldn't be surprised. There's a calm, cool certainty in the air, as if even the floor is gently nodding. Yes, your guide appears again. This time he carries a small oil lamp and a thin cotton cloth. It's getting dark, he says, and the walls will warm you just enough now. He drapes the cloth over your shoulders, not because it's cold, but because this house respects the transition between heat and chill, between day and night. You close your eyes briefly and picture a family here centuries ago. Maybe a grandmother sits just where you are now, sorting herbs on a tray while her grandson chases a cat through the hallways. Maybe a young bride practices her embroidery in the corner while her mother arranges saffron in a ceramic jar. The space would have been filled with quiet tasks, rhythmic gestures, and the hum of slow, deliberate life. Then you hear something odd. Singing. Faint, somewhere in the distance. Your guide tilts his head and smiles. Evening prayer, he murmurs, though you're not sure if it's religious or just habit. The wind carries the melody gently through the upper shafts, wrapping the song in soft echoes. And it makes you wonder, were these structures ever used for music? Could the Badgirs carry sound as well as wind? Actually, yes. Some older homes were designed with acoustic ducts, where soft chants or recitations from the courtyard could drift into other rooms without effort. A natural intercom system, if you like. One old tale even describes a blind poet who used the Windcatchers to rehearse his verses, whispering into one shaft and hearing them repeated faintly from another like a personal muse. You smile at the thought. The evening air is cooler now, even a touch crisp. You shift on the mat and notice how your body adjusts automatically. The walls are warmer than they were midday. Not hot, just gently radiating the stored heat of the day like a sun-baked hug. The adobe has done its job again, storing, timing, balancing. Your guide returns one last time and places something small in your hand. A piece of khaki shirin, a naturally sweet clay that Persians sometimes chew to stave off thirst or cleanse the mouth. Earth helps earth, he says with a wink. You nod. You stay in the sardab a while longer, letting the house speak to you. It doesn't use words, of course. Just temperatures, just air. It speaks in the difference between sun and shade, in the whisper of a breeze redirected, in the pressure of warm walls against your back. This house is not just shelter. It's collaboration. A partnership between nature and intention, between physics and poetry. Eventually you stand and stretch. Your legs feel oddly light. The cool air has made you nimble, the way morning fog makes trees feel taller. You ascend the steps slowly, one hand on the railing. Each step is cooler than the last, and when you emerge back into the courtyard, the moon has arrived. Soft silver light spills over the rooftop and brushes the rim of the Windcatcher. You look up, and it's glowing. The top of the Badgir looks like a lantern now, glowing faintly from within, as if the house itself is awake and watching. And maybe it is. By moonlight, everything shifts. The sharp outlines of the day blur into soft edges. The warm ochres of the adobe fade to silver gray. The wind is quieter now, but still present. like a lullaby that never quite ends. You cross the courtyard slowly, listening to the gravel crunch under your sandals, a gentle rhythm echoing somewhere in your spine. You look up again at the Badgir. From this angle, it almost seems to shimmer, like a crown resting on the shoulders of the home. Not ornate, not flashy, but noble, in the way a mountain or an old tree is noble. Confident in its purpose without needing to explain it. Inside, the house has changed too. The lanterns glow amber behind latticed windows. The sounds are fewer now, a soft clatter of dishes from the kitchen, a quiet sweep of a broom against brick. Somewhere, a kettle lets out the gentlest sigh. It's time for night rituals, and this home is very particular about them. You're led back to the central hall, where cushions have been rearranged, and a low tray set with dried fruits, walnuts, and a bowl of yogurt tinged with mint. Your host gestures to sit, and you do, though you almost want to lie down completely. The air has cooled even further, and yet you're never chilled. Just balanced. This moment, this space, this temperature did not happen by accident. Here's a quiet marvel. Some of the oldest Persian windcatchers weren't just vents or air ducts. They had internal filters, often built from bundles of reeds or fine wooden slats, to purify the air as it passed through. The wind was not only guided, it was refined. The Badgir was, in a sense, an air butler, not just serving air but curating it. Historians still debate whether this was primarily for health, for scent, or for acoustics. Perhaps all three. Ancient texts speak of households placing fragrant herbs or rosewater inside the shaft, so the incoming breeze would carry not just coolness, but the soft kiss of basil or myrtle. You breathe in, hoping for a trace of that now. Is that cardamom? Maybe a memory, maybe just your imagination playing with old air. The guide returns, holding what looks like a hand fan, but heavier, more sculptural. It's made of carved wood, intricate and geometrically perfect, like a small door that leads to nowhere. He holds it up to the lantern light, and the shadow it casts dances across the wall. These were modeled after the Badgir, he says. Some people carry their own Windcatcher when traveling. You blink. You'd never thought of that. A portable Windcatcher? Of course it wouldn't function the same, but the symbolism mattered. It was like carrying a piece of home, a reminder that even in the harshest places, comfort could be designed. He places it down and sits beside you. You ask about the different styles of Windcatchers. Well, he says, stroking his beard, not all were equal. Some caught wind from one direction. Others, like the big ones in Yazd, had 4, even 8 faces to catch wind no matter where it came from. You nod, remembering images of multi-directional Badgirs, tall as minarets, some reaching over 30 feet into the sky. Each face aligned to a cardinal point, like the house had eyes everywhere. These were no longer just air vents, they were architecture that listened, and below the structure responded in kind. Air traveled down vertical shafts and into stone chambers lined with ceramic tiles, where water basins waited. The air passed over the water, cooled further, and rose back through different vents, circulating gently through the house like a well-behaved ghost. Even more elaborate were the ice houses, or yakchal, those enormous domes that stored ice beneath the desert for months. Their design echoed the logic of the Badgir, only in reverse. They retained cold the way windcatchers expelled heat. One scholar even likened a Persian house to a lung, inhaling hot, dry air and exhaling cool, humidified breath. The metaphor fits. You look down at your own chest, rising and falling with slow, relaxed rhythm. You're matching the house without realizing it. Or maybe it's matching you. The guide excuses himself with a soft smile, leaving you alone with a small clay cup of sweetened tea and a flickering lantern. The breeze still whispers through the hall, lifting the corner of a rug and brushing past your ankles like a curious cat. You lean back on the cushions and close your eyes for just a moment. Behind your lids, the architecture reassembles itself in imagination. Clay walls rising under a scorching sun, long shafts carved through brick, wind pressing against their edges like a sea of whispers. You imagine the craftsmen again, those long-gone builders who didn't just think about survival but comfort, who watched how birds nested to learn airflow, who observed how water pooled and evaporated, who took knowledge from wind and stone and turned it into poetry with bricks. They weren't just builders, they were climate whisperers. Now, hundreds of years later, you're resting under their design, sheltered by thought, cooled by tradition. The moonlight has shifted again, moving across the floor in a new shape. It pools near your cup and draws a silver line toward the Badgir. You almost feel like following it, but your limbs are soft now, melting into the cushions, into the adobe, into the history of sleeping desert homes. Far above, the Windcatcher hums, not loudly, just enough to remind you, air is always moving, and this house will always guide it well. The morning comes in whispers, not declarations. Somewhere in the distance, a rooster offers a half-hearted crow. A neighbor's door creaks open. The scent of warm flatbread slips through the window like a secret. But here, inside the thick clay walls and under the quiet rule of the Badgir, the air is still cool. Cooler than it has any right to be at sunrise in the desert. You stretch, not fully awake, but no longer entirely asleep. The cushions are as soft as they were last night, the air even softer. You press your palm to the floor near the wall. It's surprisingly cold, like it's been storing night inside itself. You're not imagining it. Ancient Persian builders knew how to store coolness. The combination of thick adobe walls, shaded courtyards, and the strategic placement of windcatchers worked like a passive machine, shifting temperature like clockwork. No wires, no fuel, just geometry, gravity, and common sense. You walk slowly toward the windcatcher shaft. Light filters down in vertical ribbons, revealing dancing motes of dust. You wonder if it's always been like this, if a child 800 years ago once stood here, watching light and dust swirl in the same golden column. Probably. You run your fingers along the brickwork. It's rough, uneven, handmade. Some bricks even bear fingerprints, those of the mason who once pressed them into place, who maybe glanced up at the sky and muttered about the wind changing direction. Historians still argue about which innovation came first, the windcatcher itself, or the underground Qanat tunnels that fed them. In many homes, the two work together. Qanats, those ancient sloping aqueducts carved into the earth, carried water from distant mountains, often for miles, and then fed small pools inside homes. When the windcatcher drew air down across these pools, the evaporation cooled the air even further. You can almost map it in your head now. Wind enters from above, flows down the Badgir shaft, brushes across water or cool brick, and moves through the house in slow, silent breath. But this morning, you're not alone in noticing. A young apprentice appears in the courtyard. He carries a narrow ladder and a bundle of tools. Today, the Badgir is getting a checkup. You follow him out, shielding your eyes from the rising sun. Already, the surrounding homes are starting to warm, their walls beginning to store the day's heat. But this courtyard remains a pocket of cool. The trees here, mulberry, fig, a lone pomegranate, cast long shadows and the air near them smells green and damp. The boy climbs slowly, deliberately, barefoot on the rungs. He carries a small bundle of oiled cloths and brushes tucked into his sash. At the top, he disappears into the windcatcher's opening. You wait below, imagining what he sees. Spiderwebs in the corners, maybe a nesting bird, or just a perfect square of open blue sky. The maintenance isn't complex. It's about clearing debris, checking for cracks, brushing away anything that could interrupt airflow, like brushing your teeth, but for architecture. Windcatchers were living systems in a way. They needed to be attended to, not simply built and forgotten. Families pass down not only the home itself, but the rhythms of its care. When to block certain vents during sandstorms, how to clean the filters, which direction brought the best breeze in each season. And they weren't just for homes. Markets, mosques, even bathhouses had Badgirs. One famous bathhouse in Qanat had multiple windcatchers feeding the steam rooms, so that even the most humid enclosed chambers could breathe. You think about how radical that must have felt, entering a tiled dome in the middle of a desert, wrapped in steam, and still feeling a cool breeze drift through. A contradiction? No, just ancient HVAC with flair. The boy reappears and climbs down, brushing clay dust from his trousers. He nods to you with the faint pride of someone who knows the wind will now flow just a little better because of his work. You smile and step back inside, where the house still holds the flavor of night. The temperature has risen just slightly, but it's not unpleasant. In fact, it makes the coolness feel more deliberate, as if the house has gently allowed a bit of warmth in, like seasoning in a stew. You find yourself back in the kitchen, where breakfast is being prepared. The cook gestures to a thick ceramic pot, where milk and barley have simmered into a soft porridge. She lifts the lid, releasing steam that curls upward and, somehow, vanishes into the ceiling before it can hang heavy in the room. You glance up. There's a small auxiliary shaft in the corner, barely noticeable unless you know to look. It leads straight into the Badgir's lower chamber. Not for cooling this time, but for drawing out excess heat and moisture. A natural vent hood, centuries before stainless steel ones made it fashionable. You sit and eat slowly, appreciating that every breath, every bite, is part of a climate choreography that began long before you arrived and will continue long after you've gone. Outside, a breeze stirs the fabric of a laundry line. A wooden chime tinks against the wall. The pomegranate tree casts a red shadow that shivers slightly on the tile. And far above, the Badgir adjusts to the wind. It doesn't move, of course, not physically, but it receives the wind differently now, thanks to the boy's gentle care. The way a piano doesn't change keys, but plays truer once it's tuned. You wonder how many breezes have passed through this place since it was built. Hundreds of thousands, maybe millions. Some carrying rain, some dust, some the scent of jasmine or horses or distant cooking fires. All of them filtered, softened, invited inside. And now you too are part of that stream. A soft-breathing guest in a house that inhales desert and exhales spring. You stand in the doorway a moment longer, hand resting on the cool frame, before stepping back into the courtyard where breakfast ends and the day begins. The day stretches like molten glass. By now, the sun hangs high, merciless and golden, pressing down on the city like a heated hand. But you're gliding through a shaded arcade, a lazy breeze whispering around your ankles, as if the wind itself has joined you for a stroll. You've wandered from Yaz toward the edge of the old town, where the adobe begins to crumble and history peeks through the cracks like a nosy neighbor. But today, your path bends further outward, beyond the desert, beyond Persia. Because the Windcatcher, this quiet tower of cool, didn't stay home. No, it wandered. Windcatchers, or at least the idea of them, began to show up in other lands. In ancient Egypt, long before Caesar had a toga, tomb paintings show houses with small, fluted roof structures. They look eerily similar to Persian Badgirs, and some historians argue they were meant to channel air just the same way. Others aren't convinced. As usual, the consensus is a bit like the desert, shifting, unsettled, and always in motion. But even if ancient Egyptians only dreamed of windcatchers, it was in India, particularly in the arid northwest regions, that the Persian influence became undeniable. You step through an imagined doorway now. Sandstone walls pierced with jali, latticework screens, filtering light into delicate patterns. Above, a tall chimney-like structure dips inward, exactly like a Badgir. Only here they call it a Hawa Mahal, or wind palace. Not a structure for kings, but for the air itself. These Indian adaptations of Persian cooling blended local traditions with imported engineering, producing architectural hybrids that were as beautiful as they were breezy. Meanwhile, in the Arabian Peninsula, the idea took root fast and deep. Gulf cities like Dubai and Bahrain, long before they became glass and steel playgrounds, relied on wind towers to make the summer even remotely bearable. There they were called Badgir, and though slightly different in shape, their purpose remained the same: catch the breeze and bring it home. By the 19th century, something curious happened. You now imagine yourself in the gardens of an eccentric English aristocrat. He's obsessed with Orientalism and just had to have a wind tower despite the complete lack of desert heat. There it is, rising awkwardly above a rose garden in Surrey, designed more for show than function. A colonial flourish. But still a nod, intentional or not, to an idea that had traveled continents. It wasn't just nobility who flirted with it. The British in colonial India, ever desperate for ways to keep cool while pretending the climate didn't bother them, adopted windcatcher-like elements into some of their administrative buildings. Not always elegant, not always efficient, but they tried. Back in Persia, though, windcatchers continued to evolve. Architects began combining multiple Badgirs on a single home, each oriented to catch wind from different seasonal directions. One famous example, a merchant's house in Yazd, has 4 towers, each feeding a different room depending on the time of year. Summer winds from the north use Tower 3. Monsoon breezes? Tower 1, obviously. And it wasn't just about cooling. Some Windcatchers were designed to reverse airflow, acting as exhaust chimneys to remove hot air or smoke. That's right, Badgirs could exhale too. This dual function, inhale or exhale depending on need, made them uniquely adaptable. No wonder the concept spread. You picture an ancient caravan arriving from Samarkand, dusty and tired, and the merchant leaning out from his shaded porch, smiling as the air cools his forehead. His cousin in Cairo wants a tower like this. His brother in Lahore has already started building one. By the time they finish unloading the spices and silk, 3 more orders for Windcatchers are scribbled in the ledger. But the greatest twist? These ancient cooling towers, so basic, so elemental, are now coming back. You walk into a modern university in the United States, Arizona maybe, or Texas. The heat there isn't so different from Yazd, and above the sleek lecture halls, hidden in plain sight, are what architects call passive cooling towers. Functionally identical to Badgir's. Sometimes they even admit it. And green buildings, zero-energy homes, LEED-certified schools, all seeking inspiration from a civilization that figured it out 2,000 years ago with mud, wind, and wit. There's something funny about that. That and the race for high-tech cooling, the future loops back to the past. Some buildings now have solar-powered fans inside their Windcatchers, like giving a horse rollerblades. You smile at the absurdity, but hey, it works. And these modern Windcatchers don't just cool buildings, they cool the ego a little too. They remind us that advanced doesn't always mean better. Sometimes it just means remembering what worked. Historians still debate where the first Windcatcher truly rose. Some say a lost palace in Susa. Others point to abandoned ruins near Bam. But what's more important is that the idea of wind catching took root in dozens of cultures, each bending it slightly to fit their climate, their materials, their worldview. You sit now on the steps of a reconstructed Badgir in a cultural museum in Tehran. A group of schoolchildren runs past, squealing. A tour guide drones on in Farsi behind you. But your focus is on the wind, a small one but distinct. It hits your face just as your eyes close. You imagine it passing through time, brushing the beard of a Babylonian scribe, catching the veil of a Mughal queen, rustling the blueprints on an architect's desk in Austin, Texas. The same breeze, the same solution, just new hands building it. And you realize the wind doesn't care where it's from. It just wants to move. And for those clever enough to listen, it whispers the same message again and again. Build with me, not against me. The wind is still with you. But now it has an edge. Not sharp exactly, but determined. Like it's not just here to cool you, but to challenge you. You find yourself stepping into a different kind of breeze. One stirred not by architecture, but by argument. Because, as it turns out, even air can spark conflict. You're seated now, not in a humble desert home, but in a shadowed chamber, columns looming like watchful sentinels. Around you, the heavy robes of viziers swish as they pace. This is the court of a Persian Shah, somewhere around the 10th century. And tonight's debate isn't about war or wine or poetry, it's about ventilation. The Shah wants a new summer palace built along the edge of the Dast-e Kavir, where the heat melts even shadows. He wants it grand. He wants it livable. And his architects disagree, loudly. One insists on tall, single-shaft Windcatchers, aimed north to harness the prevailing summer winds. Another proposes a complex network of intersecting tunnels, believing the wind should be coaxed into motion, not trapped like a camel in a pen. A third, older man claims both are wrong. The answer lies underground, in the Qanat-fed cooling rooms, shaded, silent, and removed from any tower at all. Voices rise. Scrolls are unfurled. Someone knocks over a water jug in excitement. The Shah reclines on his cushioned throne, amused. "Let the air decide," he says, half mocking. "Build me one of each." And so, 3 towers rise. 3 architectural philosophies crystallized in brick and lime. The resulting airflow is measured by scribes using strips of silk tied to wooden poles. Which one performs best? Historians still argue. The silk blew in all directions. You step out of that imagined court and into the alleyways of Shiraz, centuries later. Here, the politics of air aren't confined to royalty. No, everyone has an opinion. One household swears by the narrow-shaft Badgir. claiming the compressed flow creates a cooler gust. Their neighbor insists on a wide, open-mouthed tower, arguing that slower air feels less harsh. Across the street, a grandmother shakes her head at both and gestures proudly to her multi-directional tower. A recent addition made after her cousin in Kerman wrote a glowing letter about theirs. There's pride at stake here. Reputation. Entire family disputes have sprouted over the angle of a wooden slat or the number of internal vanes inside a tower. You chuckle softly. Of course, people would argue about wind. If they could bottle it, they'd patent it. But the debates weren't always so petty. By the 12th century, scholars across the Islamic world were writing detailed treatises on air movement, heat stratification, and environmental design. Al-Kashi in Samarkand theorized that the angle of wind entry could be manipulated seasonally. Ibn Sina, Avicenna, hinted in his medical writings that airflow in homes affected the body's humors and mental clarity. Imagine explaining that to your landlord today, and yet these weren't isolated monologues. Ideas flowed like the air they studied, across deserts, through minarets, into courtrooms and mosques. Architects from different cities would compare notes by sending miniature blueprints etched on stone tablets, folded into camel satchels. Some even say secret guilds of Windcatcher masons existed, their designs passed only to apprentices deemed worthy, though historians naturally still argue about that too. But not every argument was scholarly. In one preserved letter, a merchant in Ray writes to his cousin in Isfahan, complaining that their Windcatcher design was stolen and used without credit. "You have no shame," he rants. "Even the dogs in my courtyard know whose tower this is." He ends the letter with a drawing of a wind tower labeled original copy. Intellectual property, ancient Persian style. There were even urban air rivalries, friendly mostly. Residents of Yazd often boasted that their towers sang better than those in Kerman. In return, Kermanis would quip that Yazdis had to rely on desperate wind angles because their city was so miserably flat. But behind the jokes and jabs lay something deeper. A genuine reverence for control over the uncontrollable. Harnessing wind in the middle of a desert wasn't just practical, it was symbolic. It whispered of human resilience, ingenuity, and the quiet refusal to surrender to climate. You pause here. Lean against a mud brick wall, warmed from the day's sun but slowly cooling now as the air shifts. Above you, a Badgir looms, old, cracked, patched with mismatched bricks. Yet still it works. The slightest pressure above draws stale air upward. A breeze answers, and somewhere that ancient court debate continues. Not in words, but in the walls themselves. Because the air wars never really ended, they just got quieter. Today, conservationists argue about whether to restore Windcatchers to their original specs or retrofit them with modern tweaks. Do we honor history by preserving function or by preserving form? Engineers debate optimal height-to-width ratios for efficiency. Should the interior be lined with ceramic tiles for cooling? Should we use ancient straw mud plaster or modern sealants? Everyone has a theory, no one agrees. Even urban designers have joined the fray, especially in cities exploring passive cooling as a climate solution. A municipal meeting in Phoenix ends in a shouting match over whether to mimic Yazdi towers or invent something inspired but new? Someone even invokes Frank Lloyd Wright. Silence follows. The breeze outside is smug. You smile again. The wind, you think, loves being the center of attention. And why shouldn't it? For something you can't see, it's done more to shape human comfort than nearly anything else. Walls change. Technology evolves, but we still chase that perfect breeze. Cool, steady, whispering, just when you need it most. You close your eyes now and imagine that court chamber one last time. The viziers are older, the walls are crumbling, but they're still arguing. The Shah, now more spirit than man, reclines eternally. And in the background, the wind moves through the tower they all once built. Not loudly, not forcefully, but just enough to remind them. The air always has the last word. You wake, or maybe you never really slept, as the wind shifts again. Now it smells of wet clay, apricot wood smoke, and something faintly metallic like ancient coins warmed in the sun. You're standing at the edge of a restoration site. The city is Yazd again, always Yazd, it seems, whenever someone wants to talk about windcatchers that actually work. Around you, scaffolding hugs a brick tower like a skeleton's embrace. Conservationists in linen vests and dusty boots mutter in a cocktail of Farsi, English, and French. Some point at diagrams, others frown at cracks in the plaster. And beneath it all, the slow hum of fans, not electric ones, but paper ones, waved lazily by workers taking shelter in the tower's shade. Because today isn't about theory, it's about survival. You drift inside one of the homes being restored, a 19th century courtyard dwelling that once belonged to a spice merchant. It's nothing special to look at. A cracked basin, a fountain long since dry, and the skeletal mouth of a windcatcher rising like a forgotten chimney. But even in the midday blaze, the air here is bearable. The breeze trickles down, soft and certain, brushing against your cheeks like fingers dipped in cold tea. You want to know why it still works. So you trail behind a local engineer, her sleeves rolled up, her phone camera clicking constantly as she explains that this particular tower uses a bipartite shaft, angled so that hot air exits even while cool air drops. It's not just about catching the wind, she says. It's about sculpting pressure, low, high, in between. She grins. Basically, you're tricking the air into doing something it already wanted to do. You raise your eyebrows. She shrugs. Air's lazy. It follows the path of least resistance. Your job is to lay that path. Now you're in a different home. This one deeper in the old quarter, where vines crawl over doorways and a date seller naps beside his cart. Here, the windcatcher has been sealed for decades, stuffed with newspaper and plaster during a modernization craze in the 1970s, when air conditioners were new and dreams of progress were louder than the breeze. The current owner wants it reopened. So you climb up into the tower with a pair of workers, watching as they carefully scrape away layers of cement, like peeling skin from a fruit. A breeze starts to stir almost immediately, timid at first, then bolder. One of the men laughs and holds up a feather. It dances sideways in midair. You all watch in silence as if witnessing a long-lost heartbeat. There's something sacred about it. Not in the religious sense exactly, but in that very human awe that comes when a thing works. Not because it's new, but because it knows how to be old. Of course, not every restoration is poetic. Some windcatchers have been rebuilt with fiberglass molds, painted to look like brick but hollow and purely decorative. Tourists take selfies beneath them, unaware that the air inside is stagnant, still forgotten. There's a debate, always a debate, about whether this is preservation or performance. Historians argue both ways, but you find the answer in a quiet alley behind a closed tea shop. A boy sits cross-legged on a patch of tile, sketching a windcatcher in his notebook. It's lopsided. His perspective is off. But he draws the airflow, arrows dancing through imaginary tunnels, winding down into a courtyard shaded with fig trees. His mother calls from inside. He doesn't hear her. He's dreaming of wind. You smile. Because here's the truth. As long as someone still dreams of moving air, of soft coolness and unbearable heat, of tricking the desert, then windcatchers aren't dead. They're just sleeping. They sleep in brick towers with crumbling teeth, in architectural journals with coffee rings on the corners, in bedtime stories whispered by grandfathers about the tower that sang. In cities far from Persia, Phoenix, Dubai, even London, where engineers whisper to each other, what if we didn't fight the heat? What if we listened to it? And you're now drifting through one of these faraway places. Maybe Arizona, maybe southern Spain. It's not clear, but the wind feels Persian. Which is strange because you're standing on a rooftop with solar panels and a drone buzzing overhead. A tech startup is demonstrating their new smart windcatcher, a fusion of ancient geometry and modern sensors. It adjusts its internal flaps based on humidity, angle of sunlight, and temperature. It syncs with your phone. You ask, does it work? The engineer chuckles. Depends what you mean. It doesn't use energy, and you won't sweat. But does it sing, you ask? He pauses. Not yet. And that's the question, isn't it? A restored windcatcher may cool, but does it hum? Does it catch not just wind, but time? You lean against a wall and close your eyes. The tech startup fades. The cracked plaster returns. You're back in Yazd, or maybe a dream of Yazd. Above you, a restored windcatcher pulls desert heat upward, until it disappears into blue silence. You remember something a local poet once told you. The Windcatcher is not a building, it's a prayer. We don't build it to survive, we build it to hope. And in that hope, the old wind lives on, whistling gently through walls between memory and design. You wake to the sound of pigeons arguing. Somewhere above your head, a pair of them flap and coo and stomp across crumbling brickwork, their claws ticking against ancient plaster. You're lying on your back in what used to be a merchant's receiving room, now an open ruin, half devoured by time. The ceiling is gone, the floor is littered with broken tile and drifted sand, and the only structure left standing, almost defiantly, is the Windcatcher itself. Its narrow throat opens to the sky like a long-forgotten instrument waiting to be played. You sit up slowly, brushing dust from your hands, and squint up the shaft. There's a sliver of shadow along the inside wall, and even now, a faint breeze snakes downward, bringing with it a coolness that feels almost like forgiveness. The wind doesn't care that the house is abandoned. It still comes. This Windcatcher, like many in the region, fell into decay sometime during the 20th century. Disuse, disrepair, demolition. Progress arrived not on camelback but through copper wire, air conditioners, and concrete. And when the hum of electric fans grew louder than the hush of falling air, towers like these began to crumble. Some were torn down to make way for modern apartments. Others collapsed under their own weight as time and rain and gravity peeled them open. Yet others, this one among them, survived through sheer stubbornness. And pigeon poop! You take a walk through the alleys of Old Yazd, where stories cling to the walls like ivy. Locals will tell you about the Badgirs that once caught air so perfectly, the curtains in a room would lift gently all day, never still. Others remember sneaking onto rooftops as kids, poking their heads into the towers to shout and listen for the echo. One old man swears that during a heat wave in 1965, their Windcatcher kept watermelon chilled without ice. Whether that's true, historians still argue. What is true is this. While many Windcatchers have vanished, enough remain to haunt the skyline. Skeletal fingers pointing toward an old logic the world briefly forgot. You follow the sound of a hammer. It leads you to a team of young architects working on a Windcatcher that had half collapsed. The back of the shaft is open to the sun now, its bricks charred from decades of exposure. One of the workers climbs a rickety scaffold, carrying a small trowel and a bag of handmade plaster. Lime, ash, and a little bit of cow hair, just like it used to be. Modern stuff doesn't breathe, she tells you, not looking down. But this inhales, it exhales. Her colleague below nods. Cement chokes buildings. Clay forgives them. You linger there for a while, watching them coax life back into the bones of a Windcatcher. It's not glamorous. It's slow, dusty, repetitive. They scrape off old paint with knives the size of toothbrushes. They press palm prints into the mortar. One of them hums a pop song under his breath, barely audible above the breeze. And yet, beneath the slow rhythm of restoration, you feel it again. Purpose. Not nostalgia, not tourism, not preservation for the sake of glossy brochures, but a kind of quiet rebellion against forgetting. A kind of love. Of course, not every effort is gentle. Elsewhere in the city, developers are building heritage-style neighborhoods with prefab Windcatchers. Too short, too symmetrical, too clean. They're meant for Instagram, not air. They look nice, but the rooms beneath them stay hot. Tourists love them. Locals roll their eyes. You pass a guide telling a group, this one cools like the ancients intended. But the hum of hidden HVAC pipes betrays the lie. Still, you can't help but notice the shadows these towers cast in the afternoon light. Long, sharp silhouettes that stretch across rooftops and walls like fingerprints of the past. And even if the breeze isn't real, the memory is. And sometimes memory is enough. At one point, you find yourself wandering into a schoolyard where children are drawing towers with colored chalk. Their teacher, mid-30s, sandals, tired eyes, tells you she makes them sketch the old designs before they can use software. I want them to feel it first, she says. To understand that this wasn't magic, it was geometry. Geometry and survival. One of the children shows you his drawing. It's a Windcatcher shaped like a giraffe. You laugh. The kid grins. You tell him giraffes have good airflow. He takes it seriously. Do you think they have Windcatchers in Africa? You nod. They have something like them. Because here's the quiet truth. Windcatchers didn't disappear. They scattered. They evolved. You've seen their DNA in Egypt's Malkaf, in India's Jarokas, in the vented towers of Oman and Bahrain. Even in the adobe pueblos of New Mexico and the rammed earth courtyards of Morocco, there's a similar hunger. To tame the air, to live with heat, not against it. But it was Persia that elevated the concept into an art form, into a culture, into something you could sit beneath and feel the wind on your eyelids like a soft brushstroke reminding you to breathe. Now, in this quiet stretch of late afternoon, you return to the old tower from this morning, the pigeon one. You climb up slowly, step by step, your hand grazing the coarse wall as the shaft narrows around you. The top is broken open, no longer perfect, but the air still flows. You lie down on the floor below, head against your rolled scarf, eyes tracing the shaft above. A breeze moves past your cheek, and it says, still here, still working, still waiting, because decay isn't always the end. Sometimes it's just the start of remembering. You wake slowly beneath that whispering tower, blinking into the early evening haze. The wind has shifted again, cooler now, almost shy, and you feel its fingers tracing along your collarbone, stirring your shirt with the kind of gentleness that says, stay a while. The light is pinking at the edges of the sky, and somewhere someone is grilling lamb. You can smell cinnamon too, maybe from a tea house nearby. But tonight you're not going to the tea house. You're checking in. No, not into some glossy resort on the coast with poolside margaritas and massage packages. You're checking into a modern hotel in the heart of Yazd, a place that claims to be sustainable, smart, and above all else, cool. Naturally cool, not refrigerant cool, not coal-fired cool, Windcatcher cool. At first glance, the lobby looks like any stylish boutique space. Muted clay walls, minimalist cushions, someone playing soft oud music over the speakers. But look up. There it is again. A Badgir, only this one gleams with restored confidence. It's taller than any you've seen, and its internal channels have been updated with aerodynamic inserts. Thin clay veins calibrated by engineers to maximize passive airflow. There's even a small plaque near the base that reads, inspired by 1,000 years of wind. You smile, the old bones live again. Your room is on the second floor, and as you step inside, something feels off. Not wrong, just unfamiliar. You're not immediately blasted by dry air. There's no artificial chill. But within a minute, your body starts to relax, like it's adjusting to something subtly right. The windows are shuttered, but a soft breeze is dancing across the floor, drawn in through a hidden channel beneath the bed. A small note on the desk reads, your air conditioning system is silent. It is the wind. And it is. You settle into a chair by the window and watch the sunset bleeding slowly into the desert. It's a kind of golden lavender, and the silence is deep enough to hear your own breath. The air moves, as always, because someone, long ago, figured out that with the right angles, the right height, and the right respect for nature, the desert needn't be a punishment. It could be a home. You read an article tucked into the hotel guide. It describes how architects from around the world are returning to passive cooling designs, reviving ancient knowledge after decades of relying on energy-hungry systems. Schools in Dubai are building wind towers again. A museum in California has adopted a Persian-style ventilation system. Even skyscrapers in Singapore have begun experimenting with thermal chimneys based loosely on the same principles. And while the technologies are modern, the inspiration is unmistakably old. Your phone buzzes. You ignore it. You're too busy watching an elderly man across the courtyard hang laundry in the dusk. He pauses to stretch his back, squinting up at the Windcatcher above him like an old friend. You wonder how many nights he's slept beneath it. How many summers passed without air conditioners, without fans, without anything but trust in a tower that always caught the breath of the earth? Modernity doesn't always mean forgetting, a young architect once told you on a video you half-watched last month. Sometimes it means remembering better. You didn't quite get it then. Now, sitting in this quietly breathing room, you do. Of course, not every attempt to revive Windcatchers works. You remember that laughably expensive Dubai villa project that advertised authentic Persian wind towers, then filled them with discrete ducted AC units? Or that suburban eco-home in Arizona where the owners complained that the natural wind smells like dust? Well, yeah, the wind is dust. It's earth. It's life. It's also not obligated to smell like vanilla candles and peppermint oil. That's the trade-off when you invite nature back in. You can't control it entirely, But if you welcome it, it'll surprise you. Back in your room, you switch off the lights. There's a gentle amber glow from the corridor, just enough to cast thin shadows across the walls. You lie on the bed with your arms above your head, and the airflow shifts. Subtle, deliberate, like someone adjusting the volume on a song you didn't realize was playing. It's astonishing, really, that something so ancient feels so right now. The hotel brochure says the structure emits no carbon emissions from cooling. That the Windcatcher lowers temperatures by as much as 15 degrees. That maintenance is minimal. That energy bills are nearly zero. That it's the future looking backward. And maybe it is. Historians still argue whether ancient Persia invented the very first wind tower or simply perfected it. But no one denies the influence. No one doubts that when it comes to surviving heat with grace, Persia was miles ahead of its time. Long before air conditioning turned us into chilled glass box dwellers, the Persians looked up, saw the wind, and said, "Let's build a home around that." You drift off for a moment, wake again, still beneath the same hush. Someone in the courtyard begins humming, a low, wordless tune that blends with the air like another breeze. Maybe it's the man with the laundry. Maybe it's your imagination. You can't tell anymore. The boundaries between then and now are softening. The architecture of history is folding into the moment. You're lying beneath a shape older than your country, older than most religions, older than the idea of temperature as a number. And it works. Not because it's flashy, because it's true. Because someone, 1,000 years ago, wanted their grandmother to sleep comfortably through a scorching night. And that simple human desire gave us towers that breathe. You lie still. The Windcatcher above you sighs, and the room exhales. You blink once, then again, slower this time. The room has grown darker, not with the flick of a switch, but with the gentle deepening of night itself. The kind of night that seeps rather than falls. Shadows no longer stretch, they rest. Above you, the Windcatcher hums in near silence, its long throat tuned to the desert's rhythm. It is not a machine, not really. It's more like a passageway or a memory. It doesn't hiss, it doesn't clank, it just moves air like the lungs of a sleeping city. You turn onto your side, the cotton sheet slides over your skin. The clay floor under the bed has cooled slightly, radiating the chill it soaked up from the night air. The balance of elements here, earth, air, water, fire, isn't poetic. It's practical. Centuries ago, Persians didn't meditate on balance. They built it. With lime and brick and reason. You remember the story a tour guide told you earlier? A 14th century mosque with a windcatcher so powerful, it once froze a bowl of water left beneath it. Did it actually happen? Historians still argue whether the water actually froze or whether it was simply ice cold by pre-refrigeration standards. But that's not the point. The point is that someone remembered it, passed it on, laughed about it, and told it to you. In a way, that's how windcatchers have survived. Not just through architecture, but through anecdote. Through that moment when a grandmother in Yaz looked up and said, "You know, this tower saved your grandfather from melting in 1932. You roll onto your back again. Even your breathing feels cooler. Not cold, just tempered. Like tea left out too long, but still sweet." The wind moves across your arms. You reach out, fingers brushing the edge of the wooden lattice that covers the small wall opening. It's warm. The kind of warmth that lingers, not burns. The wood has been shaped by centuries of hands. Some delicate, some calloused, all living under towers like this. It makes you wonder, how many people have dreamed under this exact breeze? How many newborns took their first breath in this tempered air? How many heartbreaks and reconciliations drifted into night with the Windcatcher's blessing? Thousands? More? You close your eyes and try to picture the first person who thought, what if I built a tall chimney, faced it into the wind, and cooled my home from the top down? You imagine them standing in the sand, one hand shielding their eyes, the other sketching in air? Maybe they were tired of watching their children sweat. Maybe they wanted their soup to stay edible past noon. Or maybe they just couldn't bear one more night of sticky sleep. Whatever the reason, they tried. And it worked. Maybe not perfectly at first. Maybe the first tower didn't turn as many heads as it turned winds. Maybe the neighbors laughed, but eventually more were built. Taller, sharper, smarter. Until whole skylines bristled with these rectangular sails, catching not light, not rain, but wind. Air itself. You sit up slowly. There's something humbling in all this. We think of our era as the peak of design, the pinnacle of comfort. We tap thermostats, ask robots for the weather, seal ourselves inside climate-controlled bunkers and call it modern. But you here in this softly breathing room, you're part of something older. A conversation between people and place that began long before Wi-Fi and continues quietly, stubbornly, tonight. You think about turning on your phone to check the time. You don't. There's no need. Time is different in this room. It folds, flows, slows down. Your eyelids are heavy, but not because of exhaustion. It's more like consent. Like your body is finally allowed to rest. The breeze agrees. It brushes your neck, gentle and low. If it could speak, it might say, "I've been waiting all day for this." And maybe it has. Waiting to be useful. Waiting to do what it's done for centuries. Guide sleep like a lullaby. And you let it. You pull the sheet a little higher. Let your breath match the whispering wind above. You imagine the rooftops of Yazd glowing under starlight, each windcatcher a silent sentinel. Watching, cooling, soothing, all without a single moving part. Just faith in air and a bit of clever design. You smile barely. No applause. No fanfare. Just wind. Just quiet. Just sleep. And now you feel it settle. The weight in your limbs. The hush behind your ears. The barely there pulse of the breeze gliding over your chest like a lullaby you didn't know you remembered. The room is so still now. Not with silence, but with permission. The kind of stillness that doesn't ask anything from you. The windcatcher above you doesn't boast, doesn't blink, doesn't need to be thanked. It just is. A presence. A patience. A soft exhale from 1,000 years ago, reminding you that not all comfort is noisy, not all progress glows blue. You don't need to move. You don't need to think. You only need to drift. Let your thoughts slow like a camel's walk beneath a purple sky. Let them soften like sun-warmed clay. Let your dreams rise like cool air in a narrow tower, pulled gently, gently upward. Even the dust outside is asleep. And the wind? It's watching over you now. Bending around corners, gliding past domes, dipping through channels carved by memory. You're a part of that now. One more sleeper in a long, long story whispered through stone and wind. So breathe, so rest, so sleep.